The other day, my friend and I were having a conversation about black tax, which is something we often talk about. And so she shared a story that in one of her lectures in uni, she studied in a multicultural university. Her lecturer asked how many students in that class often send money back home for extended family support, and it happened that only students from Africa and Asia raised their hands, and so students from Europe and Americas just stared at them in shock. And so my friend told me that every time she tells her friends from Europe or from Americas that she sends money back home for extended family support, they always stare at her in shock and ask her why would you do that. And so this clearly shows that this concept of black tax affects only some of us. And so what is black tax? Black tax is the financial support that black professionals are expected to give to their extended family members. I first came across this concept of black tax in 2016 from reading Trevor Noah's book, Born a Crime. And in one of those books, he describes what his mom describes as black tax. And so he writes, "My mother calls it black tax because generations who came before you have been pillaged. Rather than being free to use your skills and education to move forward, you lose everything just trying to bring everyone behind you back from zero." And so when I read this concept, that's when I started thinking about my relationship with black tax and how much money I think I should be spending towards supporting my family. And so this is a question for you. How much money do you spend towards extended family support, or how much money do you think we should be spending? What percentage of our salaries do you think we should be spending towards black tax? My name is Agatha from the Wealth Tribe, and this is where we learn how to build wealth together. Welcome to another episode of Wealth Wednesdays, and if you're new here, welcome to the Wealth Tribe. I'm so excited to have you here. And so before we explore the question I posed earlier on how much money do you think we should spend towards extended family support or towards black tax, let us first explore what are the causes and why is it called black tax. What causes black tax and why is it called black tax? So this concept of black tax originated from South Africa. This concept of black tax originated from South Africa, and it's linked to the apartheid policy, where the apartheid policy had very many laws that governed the relationship between the white minority and the black majority. And so what happened is that through these laws, it brought about a situation where the black majority were disadvantaged, and of course the black majority economically got the raw end of the deal. And so therefore this means that in South Africa, because of the apartheid policy, South Africa has the highest level of inequality in the world. And so the black majority in South Africa have been disadvantaged for so many years, and I can give you a few examples of how they are disadvantaged. So for example, despite black people having degrees, unemployment among black people is 40.7%, while that of white South Africans is at 8.5%. The white South Africans, who account for 9% of the population, own 90 to 95% of the country's assets. Black South Africans have to do twice as well as white people just to get the same opportunities, such as jobs. So they often have to work twice as hard or even more. And then black people are forced to pay higher interest rates on homes and vehicle loans. The above and more examples continue to cause huge economic disparities among black South Africans. And so the concept of black tax, or the word black tax, has therefore evolved to capture the racial or cultural aspects or the poor-rich gaps in the world that makes us young black professionals to always have to spare a bit of our money or some of our money to go towards extended family supports. So it has evolved to capture all those racial, rich, poor, and cultural aspects of what we are expected to do with our salaries. And so it's very important for you to understand the origin, because the origin of black tax in this concept, because you don't exist in a vacuum. You, whichever country you come from, whether you are South African or you're Kenyan or whichever African or country you come from, you don't exist in a vacuum. You exist in a bigger system, a bigger economic system that is bigger than you, and sometimes, actually most of the time, it's outside of your control. And so what happens that at the end of the day you're not fully to blame for where you are or how you behave with your money. How you behave with your money is also controlled by the flawed economic system that you exist in. And so these flawed economic systems that we exist in usually causes wealth gaps, has brought about wealth gaps. And so these wealth gaps are the reason why there is black tax in South Africa, and why we have to have this conversation about black tax. And of course, I fully understand that wealth gaps in the world is a multi-layered concept that is caused by a lot of other things, such as colonization, economic instability, historical injustices, structural inequality, racism, education disparities, so many. It is a multi-layered concept. But of course, you have to understand all these things in order for you to understand the history of black tax and why it affects you and why we are having this conversation today. And another thing why I insist that it's important for you to understand the history of black tax, it's because once in a while I often hear poor people being told by privileged people that just pull yourself by the bootstraps. You know, you're poor and somebody sees you struggling and they are wondering why are you in poverty, and they'll just tell you, just pull yourself by the bootstraps and get yourself out of poverty. And as someone who went through poverty in my childhood, I know for sure that I am not to blame for my poverty, and that you don't bring poverty upon yourself, right? You just find yourself in it. It's beyond you. And I often wonder, now that I'm self-aware, now that I'm aware of this, I often wonder, how do these privileged people want us to pull ourselves by the bootstraps if we do not even have the boots anyway? You know, how does a poor person pull themselves by the bootstraps if they don't even have the boots? So it doesn't make sense. And so it's, while we are having this conversation of black tax, I always say that, of course, people who expect us to support them financially are often going through a level of poverty. Most of the time, they're usually going through a level of poverty. But those of us who are expected to support these people also have our own challenges, such as, for example, we are always struggling to keep our jobs, or always being told we will be fired, being threatened at work that we'll be fired. And therefore, both of these parties, and that's why I insist that this conversation should be full of empathy, because at the end of the day, that this conversation should be full of empathy, because as I've said, the person who is expecting money from you is often going through a level of poverty, and you're also struggling in this capitalist world, trying to keep your job where you get that money that you're supposed to send to your extended family members. And as I was doing research for this video, I came across a very mind-blowing quote about black tax. I don't know who wrote this quote, so I don't know who to attribute it to. So if you know, please share with me in the comment section. This is what the quote says: "It's beautiful and tragic at the same time. The desire to look after others is frequently the reason why successful professionals have trouble saving money and building wealth that could make a difference to the next generation." And so now that you understand the history of black tax, we can now dive in and understand what are the disadvantages of black tax. So black tax impacts you and your generations to come in several ways. Number one, it affects your ability to save. So if, for example, you're giving $200 per month towards black tax, you know, you're taking $200 out of your salary per month to give towards black tax. That's $2,400 per annum that is going towards black tax, and therefore this is money that could go towards the much needed emergency fund that most of us do not have. And then number two, it affects your ability to invest. If we stick with the same example, the same $2,400 per annum that one could be giving towards, that one could be giving towards black tax, if we take that amount of money and invest it in a conservative investment that gives you 10% return per annum for about 5 years, if you compound that that amount in 5 years time, that will amount to $3,865. That's a lot of money, again, that could go towards the much needed emergency fund that most of us are living without, especially during these times of very high inflation. And every time I give this example, somebody always asks me, but you can do both. It's true, you can do both. It's possible for you to have to do both, to have both in your budget. It's possible for you to have an X amount of money that goes towards black tax, and also have an X amount of money that that goes black tax, and also have an X amount of money that you invest every single month. Yes, it's possible. But the point here is this: for somebody who has, for this person who is giving $2,400 towards black tax every year, if you compare this, the person who's giving $2,400 every year towards black tax, with somebody who gives zero amount of money towards black tax, then these two people's ability to compound their wealth or to build the generational wealth is going to be worlds apart. This person who's giving zero towards black tax is going to build generational wealth much faster as compared to this person who has this huge burden of giving money towards black tax. And then disadvantage number 3 is that when you have an amount of money that always goes towards black tax, it means that it's harder for you to build generational wealth, because what happens is that you're not only responsible, it's harder for you to build generational wealth because you're not only responsible for yourself and your nuclear family, you're also responsible for your grandparents, for your parents, for your cousins. Some people are even responsible for their in-laws. I've seen situations where people are even responsible for their in-laws, and they even have to contribute towards paying off debt for their in-laws. Yes, as a financial coach, I've seen all these stories where people have to pay debts for their in-laws, for their parents, for their grandparents, and therefore this becomes, as opposed to somebody who's paying zero in black tax, when you compare to this person who's overburdened by black tax, it means it's going to be very hard for them to not only build wealth for themselves, but even to have anything, any amount of money to pass towards their children, and therefore no generational wealth. And so this is one of the things, the fact that you have to first pay debt for your people before you start building your own wealth, before you start building your own emergency fund, before you start investing. This is one of the concepts that leads to generations of scrapping by. I don't know if you've gone to villages or if you've gone to places where generations after generations after generations are just scrapping by. They're just surviving and they're just living in debt. So this is one of the biggest disadvantages of black tax, is that you will always be suffering. You will always just be scrapping by. And then disadvantage number 4 is that it affects your mental health. So for those of us who have to give money towards black tax, our ability to keep those jobs that give us that money that gives us that money that we put towards black tax, our ability to keep your job and properly manage your money, properly stick to a budget and invest every month, is strongly associated with your mental health. So ability to keep a job, properly manage your money and build wealth depends on how good your mental health, or depends on how good your peace of mind is. And so I've interacted with people who their mental health is affected by black tax in several ways. For example, I've met people young professionals who are carrying this guilt on a daily basis that they're not doing enough. So you're stuck in this job that pays you, for example, $600 a month, and you're putting $100 a month towards black tax. But you often feel, and in your heart of hearts, that this $100 is the only amount of money that you can afford to put towards black tax. But you find yourself in a situation where every day you feel guilty that you're not doing enough, that this $100 that you're giving toward black tax is not enough. And I often say that guilt is a very unproductive emotion, because it doesn't make a difference. It's very unproductive. It's not making a difference. All it's doing is it's giving you terrible mental health, stress day in and day out. I've also come across people who, because of the burden of black tax they have to deal with, they're always anxious. At the end of every month, they're dealing with this level of anxiety, because at the end of the day, they have to put X amount of money towards extended family support, and most of the time they can't even afford. And sometimes you even have to take up debt in order for you to support your extended family. And through these because of this anxiety, people actually end up making terrible life decisions, and most of the time it's terrible financial decisions. So you will find someone who will randomly go take $1 million worth of debt in order for them to support their extended family support, and in that process of taking that debt, they didn't even read the documents by the financial institution in order for them to understand how much interest rate they're paying. Some people will end up with even a lot of credit card debt, just trying to survive and just trying to support their families. And then another the same concept, another disadvantage of black tax is more debt. I have come across I have interacted with people who have taken up debt to support their extended families, and and it gets worse in that I've come across people who have been guilt tripped, mostly by their mothers. Mostly by their moms, because moms have this advantage in that they know that we love them. They know that we love them, and therefore they use the fact that we love them and we have this very soft spot for them to guilt trip us to take loans on their behalf. And most of the time, 99% of the time, they do not contribute towards paying off that debt. And so you end up you already struggling financially, but you end up finding yourself in even more debt just trying to support your extended family. And I've even come across situations where people will be told to take up debt on behalf of family members just for those family members to keep up appearances, to keep up with the Joneses. So sometimes it's not even a dire need. Sometimes it's just, our neighbors got a new car, and as we are still driving our old Toyota, can you please take a loan on behalf of us, on our behalf, in order for us to upgrade our car? I have seen those situations as a financial coach. So yes, there are so many disadvantages that come about with black tax. Now, if you're in a situation where you're dealing with black tax, now let's talk about how can you actually deal with black tax. Which tips can you use to deal with black tax, or to either manage this situation or get yourself out of that situation altogether? Before I give my 19 or 18 or so tips, it's very important for me to put a disclaimer that not all of us are dealing with the same magnitude of black tax. I have interacted with some people who've gone through such extreme traumatic situations due to the amount of black tax and due to how toxic their family members are when they're asking for this money. They've gone through such toxic situations that they have had to take extreme measures in order for them to get themselves out of this situation. Some people have had to go through extreme depression, if I can describe it as such. Some people have had to go through depression, and some people have had to completely separate themselves from their families. Some people have had to cut off their families in order for them, because that was their way of dealing with black tax. This is an example to tell you that yes, not all of us are dealing with the same magnitude when it comes to black tax. Some people are giving 60% towards their 60% of their salaries towards black tax. Some of us are paying nothing. Others are paying $10 towards black tax per month, and of which we are paying voluntarily. So as you can see, we are not dealing with the same magnitude. I have to give this disclaimer because every time I have this conversation and I give all these tips, some people come, to the comment section and tell me, but this doesn't apply to me. Yes, listen to all the 18 or 19 suggestions and decide which one applies to you. If it applies to you, because of course I don't expect you to incorporate all these 19 suggestions, if possible, well and good. If it does not apply to you, skip it. If it applies to you, incorporate it and have, and I wish you all the best in your financial freedom journey, or getting yourself out of, or getting yourself to a position where you can manage black tax. So, point number 1 on how to deal with black tax: go to therapy. Yes, go to therapy. Why do you need to go to therapy? In order for you to understand, or for you to learn how to deal with black tax. There are a few things that therapy taught me. I'll share a few things that I learned from therapy on how to deal with black tax. Number 1, I learned that a child who grows up being guilt-tripped often becomes a child who self-doubts. What do I mean? Most of us are in black tax situations where you know that you can only afford to give $1,000, for example, or even $100, for example, towards black tax. But your family members your family members are the ones you grew up with, because you grew up in a toxic home. Because yes, a lot of us grew up in a toxic home. Because you grew up in toxic home and you are guilt tripped, anything that you did as a child, in order for you to do anything as a child, it had to come through guilt. Because of that guilt tripping, you became an adult who self-doubts. So even if you know that that it's only $100 that you can give towards black tax, in your heart of hearts you know that is the only money that you can afford, you're often guilt tripped to give more, and you therefore end up suffering, and you therefore end up in debt. And so that is why you should go to therapy, so that you can understand to what level is black tax a burden to me, and how does my childhood affect, do my childhood experiences affect, because most of us do affect how I deal with the concept of black tax. So again, a child who grows up being guilt tripped becomes an adult who often self-doubts, and therefore you're not able to set boundaries. Yes, you self-doubt until to a level where you're not able to set boundaries. That's what happens to most of us. Number 2, something else I learned from therapy is that don't expect compassion or empathy from people who've proven that they don't have. So I've come across, I've had stories of people in their families who they give their family, for example, you give like $600 every month or thereabout to your extended family members, in the hope that these family members will give you empathy or will give you love in return. So what you're trying to do in your head, you're saying, I'm giving you $600 worth of money, but I want you to give me empathy or love back. So most of us, by giving towards black tax, sometimes it's not even genuine. Sometimes what we're trying to do because of what we lacked as children. For example, if you lacked love, what you're trying to do is that you're trying to buy love from your relatives. And which is why I say I am not a therapist. So I'm not in a position to determine really why you behave the way you behave with money. But a lot of people are in such situations. Something else I learned when it comes to black tax and therapy is that freedom is not something that is given to you. It's something you have to create, and it's something you have to get by force. So a friend of mine taught me that, or even therapy taught me that some family members are actually okay with asking you to give them more money that you can afford. Some family members are actually okay with being dependent. Some family members are actually okay with not working hard and just sitting and expecting you to provide for them. And so in such situations, you don't expect that family member one day will experience a miracle, and then they'll come and tell you, oh, I have been asking from you more than I need. No such miracle will happen. And so in that case, it's upon you to take the freedom from them, to grab your own freedom and decide that, no, I'm not going to allow X person to control me. What I'm going to do is that, I'm not going to allow these people to control me. I am going to decide that this is how much money I earn, and this is how much I can comfortably afford to give this family. Something else, another concept I've come across when it comes to the link between therapy and black tax, or mental health and black tax, is a lot of us who have good jobs are going through this situation called survivorship guilt, because you're the one person in your family who has the most education, or because you're the one person in your family who is the most exposed, who got an opportunity to travel the world through a scholarship, for example. So you got a scholarship, you went abroad, you got a good education, you got exposure, you got a job, which is a good thing, but your siblings, which now brings me to another concept that I learned from my friend TK, who is also personal finance content creator, and I will link him in the description. This brings me to the concept of sibling tax. You are that person who got all this exposure, went abroad, got a degree, and your siblings did not have this same opportunity, and now you're living in another country, or you're even living in the same country, and you have this good job, you earn the highest amount of money, and so you often give towards your siblings or towards your family because of survivorship guilt. You feel guilty that you got these opportunities, or these opportunities were awarded to you. And again, remember what I said, guilt is a very unproductive emotion. And so what happens is that you give all this money, sometimes even denying yourself the basics, because you want to act like Jesus. You want to save everyone. At the end of the day, if you go to therapy, if you find a good therapist, you'd be able to understand that you're not Jesus. Your role in this world, or your role in that family, is not to save people. Okay, your role in that world is not basically to save everyone. That's what I mean. In a nutshell, here are the few things that therapy will teach you when it comes to your relationship with black tax. One, therapy will teach you how to set boundaries, because as I said, a child who grows up being guilt-tripped becomes an adult with self-doubt, and so that is why most of us are not able to set boundaries. This word is often thrown around. Just say no. When your mom calls you, or when your grandparents call you, or when your uncle calls you to ask you for $200, just say no. It's not easy. For people who've gone through toxic childhood, it's not very easy for them to have the confidence to say no. It's not easy for them to have the confidence to set boundaries. Therapy will also teach you how to redefine your success, because most of us are stuck in situations or mental situations where we think that being able to act as Jesus or as the savior of our families, that is what success means to us. That is what success is. And so you live in that world of guilt because you're not able to save 15, 20 members. You don't have, and most of us will never make enough money to be able to save 15, 20 people. And so therefore therapy will teach you how to redefine your success, because that cannot be the only way that you define your success as an adult. And then therapy will also help you to define love, because most of the time our family members are telling us X amount of money. I've had situations where people have sent, let's say, $100 to their family members, and then the family member will call them back and ask them, I was expecting $300. So you see, according to that family members, $300 is what to them love is how much they define love. $100 to them is nothing. That is not sufficient, but to you, that is how much you can afford. And so when you go through therapy, it will show you how to define and give love as you know it. Define and give love and as you know it. And therapy will also teach you to accept what you can give, and accept what you can give, and most of the time to know that is enough. So point number one, and that's why I have been here for several minutes to explain to you, is go to therapy. Because as I said, most of us cannot just snap. Yes, actually that's the right word to give. Most of us cannot just snap out of not being able to say no or not being able to set boundaries. Tip number 2 on how to effectively deal with black tax is remove yourself from the dependency cycle. One of my favorite quotes is from Collin's book, The Simple Path to Wealth, and he says, as individuals, we only have one obligation to society: to ensure that we and our children are not a burden to others. So, as an adult, especially one who has a job, I insist, especially one that has a job, it is your responsibility to manage your money properly and to get yourself to a situation where you achieve self-sustenance. If you do this, if you manage your money properly and achieve self-sustenance, not only will you lessen the burden of black tax as a whole from your family, you will also set a good example to other family members. Other family members who are struggling, who are struggling financially, or who are working, will see you and say, yeah, if she did it, then I can do it. If she manages her personal finances well, I also can do it. And so one of the ways to remove yourself from the dependency cycle from your family is, one, setting up an emergency fund. If you have a job, I always encourage people to constantly ask yourself, if I lost this job tomorrow, how long would I last before I plunge back to poverty and become a burden to my family members? And so you should start. How do you achieve self-sustenance, or how do you remove yourself from the dependency cycle? Number one, you start by building a 6-month emergency fund. And a 6-month emergency fund is an amount of money where if you lost that job tomorrow, you'd be able to live the same lifestyle, afford the same lifestyle for 6 months as you're scouting for another job. And after you've come up with an emergency fund, which is point one, the next thing you should do is come up with an overall financial plan that ensures you make progress in your financial freedom journey or in your financial wellness journey. And so this financial plan, of course, should include items such as the debt. You should be able to determine how much debt you're carrying, come up with a debt payoff plan, come up with investments, determine how much money should go towards your savings and how much money should go towards your investment. If this is something you're struggling with, I will link the videos that have already done about how to determine how much money you should save and how much money you should invest. And so yes, you should work as an adult who has a job. You should work towards self-sustenance, because that is a way to reduce the burden of black tax as a whole in your extended family. Point number 3 is to determine who is your primary, secondary, and tertiary responsibility. I know of a lady who she earns around $1,000, and every month she used to spend $600. She used to send $600 to her parents and her in-laws every month. So she's earning $1,000 and she's sending $600 towards extended family support, and she would remain with only $400. And this $400 was not sufficient to pay her bills and pay her children's, maintain her household, which includes paying school fees for her 3 children. So what used to happen, her children used to be sent home all the time because she has not paid school fees for them. It's hard for you to accept this truth, but the truth is not everyone is your responsibility. And even if some people are your responsibility, you have to determine who is your primary responsibility, who is your secondary responsibility, and who is your tertiary responsibility, so that as soon as you receive your paycheck, you start with your primary responsibility. For example, this lady that I've given as an example, the person who is her primary responsibility is her household and her children. She should not be sending $600 when her children's school fees has not been paid. And so you have to always determine who is your primary responsibility. And every time I have this conversation with people, especially moms, and I ask them, now let's go through this session where we determine who is your primary responsibility, so that you can reduce your black tax responsibilities. Most of the time when I ask moms who their primary responsibilities is, they never name themselves as their primary responsibility. And so this is a reminder to you that you are your primary responsibility. Before you take your money outside of your household, first make sure that you have catered for your own needs before you extend that help, because at the end of the day, charity begins at home. Okay? And so it's true, it is indeed true that some people are not your responsibility. Accept that some people are not responsibility and begin from there. Point number 4 is budget for black tax. So because of what I talked about in the beginning of this video, systematic inequalities, levels of poverty, economic inequalities, it's impossible for some of us not to give money towards black tax. And so what happens, and so therefore that's why budgeting is a key aspect of your financial freedom journey. You should have a budget that determines, this is how much money I earn, this is how much money I put towards my rent, bills, and everything else, and this is how much money I can afford to give towards black tax. And this point, it depends on your circumstances. Maybe if some people earn a lot of money and therefore they can afford to give, for example, $1,000 towards black tax every month. If you don't earn a lot of money, you should not be playing keeping up with the Joneses because your friend built their parents a house, your friend bought their parents a car. Of course, we aspire to provide a beautiful life. Most of us, we aspire to provide a beautiful life for our parents or people who brought us up, but you should not play keeping up with the Joneses. You should be able to look at your budget and determine how much can you based on how much money you make and your level of responsibilities, how much can you afford to give. And this is why I always say there's no magic bullet towards solving black tax. It has to be customized. It has to be customized to your situation. And if you struggle with budgeting, and you know that you'd struggle to determine out of how much you earn, how much you should genuinely give to a budget towards black tax, one tip I can offer is track your expenses. Every time, for example, track how much money, even if you don't track all your expenses, you're a complete beginner, at least start by tracking how much money, you're giving towards black tax. So for example, if you're able to track how much money you give towards black tax for 3 months, if you can track for 3 months, then you can have an average. Then you'd be able to know, month 1 I gave $200, month 2 I gave $300, month 4 I gave $400. Because the truth is, a lot of us don't even know how much money we give towards black tax. And so if you tell them, them. They're supposed to budget and determine how much you can comfortably afford. Towards black tax, they will struggle. So if you track, then you will see how much money you've been giving towards black tax, and therefore you'll be able to ask yourself a genuine question. This amount of money that I've been giving black tax, am I stressing, am I straining myself, or can I comfortably continue giving towards this amount? And some people even come to the realization that I make so much money and I'm giving little. In that situation, yes, it's possible to say I will add to how much money I give towards black tax. And some people, they'll be like, this is a lot compared to how much money I make, and so therefore you decide that you're going to reduce how much money you give towards black tax. And I have customizable budget tracker that you can use, and I will link the link in the description box for you to grab one for yourself. And then another tip is set a deadline for how long you can support someone. You don't want to put yourself in a situation where the person you're supporting financially thinks that you're going to support them in perpetuity. You don't want to set that precedence. And so you want a situation where, if, for example, you have decided to help a family member to set up a small business, you want to be clear, to communicate to this family member that, listen, I'm only able to give only $300 or $200 per month towards setting up this business, and I am going to give this $300 towards supporting you put up your business for the next 1 year. In that way, that person will know that you've set the boundary, and this person will take responsibility to know that between now and the next 1 year, I should manage my business finances of my business and my personal finances so well, because at the end of the year, my relative who is supporting me will not be in a position to help me any further. Because the truth is, for some of us, when we are deciding to help someone, for example, set up a business, it means that we have to remove a luxury out of our life, or you have to remove one luxury out of our life so that we are able to help this person. And so you don't want to be in a situation where this person assumes you're going to help them forever, because what happens if you do not communicate how long you want to set this boundary, what will happen is that you're going to end up resenting each other. And I will give you a story of how resentment comes into place if people do not communicate how long they're going to support each other. Don't take up a burden that belongs to another. What do I mean by this? From one of my favorite personal finance books, George S. Classon's The Richest Man in Babylon. This is a very little book that I make a point of reading every year, because it has a lot of gems when it comes to being able to manage your finances. And so in this book, there's a short story that I'm going to tell you. I'm going to read it to you. So there is a character called Rodan in this book, and so Rodan is a spear maker. So what happened is that Rodan made a very good spear for the king, for the army. And so the king gave him 50 pieces of gold as a payment for making this spear. And so what happened is that when Rodan's sister realized that Rodan has been given 50 pieces of gold, the sister came and told Rodan, listen, my husband has always wanted to be a businessman, or my husband has always wanted to be a merchant. Could you kindly lend my husband the 50 pieces of gold so that he can start his merchant business, and when his business becomes successful, my husband is going to pay you back the 50 pieces of gold. Now 50 pieces of gold for Rodan, because he was a poor person, he was a poor spear maker. 50 pieces of gold for him is equivalent to 50 years of spear making. 50 years. Basically, this 50 pieces of gold is equivalent to the amount of money that Rodan would have earned his whole lifetime. His whole lifetime as a productive spear maker. It's worth that much. It's worth his whole lifetime. It's worth his whole productivity. And so when Rodan was approached by the sister to lend the husband this money, he didn't know what to tell the sister, because at the end of the day, the sister is family, which is what we struggle with. And so what Rodan did is that he went to the gold lender, the gold lender of Babylon, and asked the gold lender to give him advice. He asked him, what should I do? Should I give my sister's husband the 50 pieces of gold so that he can start his business. So the gold lender responded using a story. The gold lender responded to Rodan using a story. So he told him, in Babylon, there used to be this farmer who owns two animals. He owned an ox and he owned a donkey. And so, of course, the ox's job was to go to plow the land, go to the farm, plow the land every day, because he was a farmer and farming seasons were always there. And so, so what happens is that one day, because the donkey works a lot, so the ox's job is to plow the land every day, and then the donkey's job was to carry the farmer. He used to be strapped with strapped with good fabric, and then his job was to basically ferry the farmer around if he wants to go to town and such things. So therefore, the donkey had little work to do. The donkey was having the soft life, while the ox was having the suffering life. And so one day the ox approached the donkey and told the donkey, listen, I work every day, my feet are hurting, my back is tired, I'm so tired, I never have even a day off, I never have any rest. But you're just a creature of leisure. You're a creature of leisure in that you only take the farmer around, and if the farmer doesn't want to go anywhere, then you have so many days of rest. And so the ox asked the donkey, kindly give me a day off. So give me a day off by taking up my role of going to the farm to plow. And so the donkey, being a nice person like most of us are, and being an empathetic person, told the ox, okay, fine, I accept. So tomorrow, when the slave comes to, because those are the words that are used in the book because it's a very old book, tomorrow when the slave comes to fetch you to go to the land, just lie down and pretend that you're very sick and therefore you cannot work. And so that's what happened. So the slave came, tried to wake up the ox to go plowing, and then the ox pretended that it's almost dying, it can't work. And so the slave went and told the farmer that the ox is sick, it can't go plow. It was plowing season. The farmer told the slave, go and get the donkey, go hitch the donkey, let it go to the farm, because plowing must go on. This is the season for plowing, it must go on. And so that's what happened. So the slave went and took the donkey, and the donkey spent the whole day in the farm. And so it was so tired, because remember, it is a creature of leisure, it's a creature of soft life, so it doesn't know how to work so hard. So it spent the whole day working. It was so tired, it had so many bruises, its legs were hurting. And so when it came back home in the evening, the ox was so happy. The ox was like, whoa, thank you for making me have a day off, I rested. But then, so that's what the ox said. But then the donkey was angry. In fact, the donkey was bitter. It was bitter. It was so bitter because it spent the whole day suffering by taking the ox's role. And so through this bitterness, because of this bitterness, what happened? They ended their friendship. Yet the donkey and the ox were always friends throughout their lifetime, but that ended their friendship because of the amount of bitterness that the donkey was harboring. And so that's what happens in most of us when it comes to our relationship with black tax, in that we should be able. And so before I tell you what my conclusion from this story, we can also derive the conclusion from this book. And so this book says, when it comes to this story, in that the author says that gold, which is in this case money, bringeth unto its possessor responsibility and a changed position with his fellow men. He's now referring to Rodan, with his fellow men. It bringeth fear lest he lose it or be tricked away from him. It bringeth a feeling of power and ability to do good. Likewise, it bringeth opportunities whereby his very good intentions may bring him into difficulties. And so the conclusion to this story, the author says that if you desire to help thy friend, do so in a way that will not bring thy friend's burden upon thyself. Because what would have happened if Rodan gave all his lifetime of hard work to his sister's husband and then the business failed? What would have happened? Rodan also would have died of poverty, because it's a business venture. And remember, the sister's husband had never been a merchant before, had never tried any business. So it's such a risky situation, and so he probably would have lost his all his money. And so this So exactly, this story teaches us to love within limits. Love within limits. It's good to help, of course. It's very good to help. Even the author of this story says, of course, it's very good to help, but always help in a way that don't 100% take a burden that belongs to another. And that's a way that you should deal with your black tax situation. Love within limits. Don't take a responsibility that belongs to another person. Let that person, especially if they're an adult, of course, we are referring to adults, not children. If they're an adult, let them take responsibility for their own lives. And then another point is that two broke people, I always say, two broke people cannot help each other. One of my favorite authors, her name is Ashley Seaford, was giving this story, and I will link the video, about how every time the mom asks for money and Ashley says, no, I don't have money, or I cannot afford to give you that much, the mother always responds in an emotional way. The mother always responds to say that, oh, you're not giving me this money because you hate me, you're not giving this money because you're not taking up responsibility as a firstborn child. And so for a long time, Ashley, like most of us, battled with this guilt of, how do I tell my mother no? And so she further learned that she had been giving this money for so many years without being able to say no. And then one day she just stopped and decided that, no, I'm not always going to be giving all my money to support my mom. And I know this is a very charged topic that I'm talking about. So what she did is that she stopped giving all that money, and instead she decided that she's always going to invest, for example, 10% into her future. Because at the end of the day, remember, my point here is two broke people cannot help each other. So if you're earning your money and all that money you're giving it to someone, and especially if you're giving it to someone who doesn't know how to plan for their money, or who's not even investing in their future, so you're giving all of it and you're also left with nothing. So all of you at the end of the month are left with zero or even negative. So you're two broke people, and two broke people cannot help each other. And so the point here is, don't give money that belongs to your future. So when you receive your salary, before you help people, save at the very least 10% of whichever percent applies to you, because remember, these circumstances vary. Save an X amount of money towards your future, and then have a budget for how much money you can give towards extended family support. And then another point is, always pay yourself first before helping other people. Always pay yourself first. So this point is connected to the other one. And so I always remind people that when you're traveling, if you've ever been on a plane, there's always that oxygen mask rule in a plane. So you, in a case of emergency, or in case the cabin loses pressure, oxygen masks will fall. So the rule is always put the oxygen mask on your own mouth and nose first before helping other people. This means that even if you're a parent and you're in that flight with your child, the rule is you first put the oxygen mask on your own nose and mouth before you even help your child. And so that is what it means, that to some of us, that's what we need to do to deal with black tax. Pay yourself first. Put 10% or such an amount of money towards your savings or towards your future before you extend help to other people. And then another point is, manage other people's expectations by setting boundaries. Now, a friend of mine reminded me of this African concept, and I think it also originates from South Africa, called Ubuntu. And Ubuntu is about, I am because you are. Because in most African societies, most of us grew up in a community, which therefore means so many people contributed towards your education, your upbringing, everything. So many people contributed towards your success, towards who you are today, including I. So many people contributed towards educating me, feeding me, housing me. My God, I've grown up in so many homes, and therefore that is what Ubuntu is. I am because you are. This therefore means that for most of us, you cannot escape paying black tax. This therefore means that most of us have a responsibility to support our relatives. But for you to be able to support, so that you don't end up depressed, and so that you don't end up stressed, that responsibility has to come with boundaries. So support within established boundaries. And so from the first point where I was talking about therapy, I came to realize that yes, most of us are not able, it's not automatic for most of us to be able to set boundaries without external help. And so if you can do it on your own, set the boundaries. And setting boundaries is also starts internally. It's also about deciding that these are my boundaries. It's about first defining boundaries for yourself and communicating themselves to you clearly. And then after you set the boundaries, then you communicate them to your family. And then after you communicate them to your family, you have to hold them accountable. For example, one boundary I have with my money is, if I loan you money and you do not pay back, then don't ask me for money again. Don't ask me for a loan again. Going forward, I'm either going to give you as a gift at my own discretion, So that is one boundary I have. So first, create your boundaries, communicate them, and hold people accountable. And if you're struggling to set these boundaries, ask for help. Ask for external help. For most of us, just like I said, it's not automatic. And then another point is always put the ball in their court. One of my favorite lessons when it comes to black tax I learned painfully, unfortunately, is that you cannot be more responsible over a person than they are responsible for themselves. Again, you cannot be more responsible over a person than they are responsible for themselves, which is why it's very important for you to put their ball in their own court. So, for example, if somebody is struggling with budgeting, if somebody is struggling with finances, you might approach them and tell them, hey, I'm good at budgeting, I'm good at saving, I know a few investments, and I would like to teach you. Let the person take the responsibility of coming to you and telling you, hey, this is how much money I make in a month, these are my bank statements, this is what I'm looking into investing, can you help me? Let always put the ball in their own court. Let person take up the responsibility, because at the end of the day, they're an adult and you don't want to end up babysitting people, because babysitting people, again, most of the time ends up to resentment. Another point, talk about money. Most of us are in weird, extremely difficult black tax situations. Why? Because we don't talk about money in our families. These things were not talked about in school. They were not talked about at our homes. Our parents always quarreled, for example, about money. Our association with money is that of pain, and therefore what happens is that unspoken expectations lead to premeditated resentments. Unspoken expectations lead to premeditated resentments. So how this plays out is that you'll find someone, a lawyer, a doctor, a finance person, or anyone who has a good job, and they're making, let's say, $100,000 in a month. But your family actually thinks that you make millions. Your family thinks that because you're a doctor, or because you work in a law firm somewhere, you earn millions, or because you're an engineer somewhere, you earn millions. And so what happens, because of unspoken expectations, people expect that you should be sending $2,000 back to them every end of the month. But you remember you're earning $1,000 in a month, so it's not possible for you to, unless you end up in extreme debt, it's not possible for you to contribute $2,000 a month. And so therefore, that's why you have to speak about money. At the very least, if it's difficult, at the very least, you can tell people, listen, here's a list of my responsibilities. I have 2 kids. I am currently taking up my master's. I have to pay X amount of transport per month. This is how much my rent is. At the very least, open them up to seeing how much responsibility you have, so that people don't have all these expectations. Because what happens is that it will lead to resentment. If people don't talk about money, is because don't set boundaries, is equal to resentment that you should have avoided if you just had that conversation about money. And of course, this is easier said than done. And I know from experience and from the people that I coach, it's easier said than done. And so sometimes you have to have external help on how to have this conversation. So sometimes you have to have external help from a financial coach like me, or you can have external help from a therapist who helps you, again, like what I talked at the beginning of this video, how to set boundaries, how to determine what love is, how you express love. Because sometimes even visiting people is a way of expressing love, as opposed to always it being money. Always ask yourself who is genuinely making an effort, because despite some people in our lives being in situations where they are okay with taking too much away from us, and despite us having some people in our lives who want to be dependent, who want to be forever dependent, we also have some people in our families who are genuinely working hard, who are genuinely making an effort. So those people who are genuinely making an effort towards being better at budgeting, towards being better at saving, towards being better at investing, help them. But of course, connected to another point that I talked about, set a deadline. Be able to allow people to take responsibility over their life by setting a deadline for how long you can support. Another one, don't be an enabler of bad money habits. How many situations have we seen in the news where somebody, for example, is suffering from alcoholism? Because I completely understand that is an actual medical ailment. Somebody is suffering from or struggling with alcoholism, and so those of us who are supposed to help him just keep giving this person cash money, hoping that by giving them money it will change them, and most of the time it ends up in tears. And so don't be an enabler of bad money habits. If you know, for example, somebody suffers from a drug addiction, somebody is in a situation where they are never able to live within their means, or they're always buying unnecessary stuff, then stop being an enabler of bad money habits by giving them money. Maybe for such people you should directly go to the supermarket and have groceries delivered to their door. Maybe you should help them take up a course, pay for them a course instead of giving them cash money. Another thing you could do is collaborate with family members, because another thing that we suffer from is that when we want to play saviors, so we want to take up the whole burden of saving somebody instead, and most of the time we can't afford it. So instead, collaborate with your family members. And take this person back to school if they are willing to. Always remember, most of the time the responsibility has to come from this person. The initiative has to come from this person. So collaborate with your family members, take them back to school. If they want to go therapy, pay for them therapy. So if they're making genuine, don't be an enabler of bad money habits. And then you can also teach your kids personal finance and investing, because at the end of the day, the reason why most of us are in situations we are in financially is because we never learned it in school, we never learned it at home, we have no idea. We just one day found ourselves with a job, responsibilities, and money in a bank account, and we had no idea how we're supposed to handle this money, or how we're supposed to where we're supposed to direct it. And therefore we ended up in the situations where did my money go at the end of the month? And one of the where did my money goes is black tax that was not budgeted for. And because we want to leave a legacy at the end of the day, I tell people that you just don't want to live and die. At the very least you want, and that's why we're having this conversation, at the very least you want to be able to live and leave a legacy for your kids. For those of us who aspire to have kids, that is very important. You leave a legacy for your kids, and even if it's not kids, some people want to leave a legacy for their nieces, for their nephews, for their parents, for their extended families. And so one of the ways that you can do this is having genuine conversations, or teaching your kids how to handle money as soon as you can. Collaborate with family members. I have often interacted with people, especially my coaching clients, who, because they have big jobs, and because they have big jobs, and people in their family have this assumption that they make a lot of money, what happens is that the burden of black tax is given to them, is left to them. So every other person is out there in the city, or whether in the city or in the village, living a good life, but this one person is the one who carries the whole burden of the family, when it comes to black tax. So if somebody in the family is unwell, this is the person who gets called. If somebody needs school fees, this is the person who gets called. If somebody needs transport to go back to school and they're lacking, this is the person who gets called. And so most of the time, so there's the assumption that this person has a lot of extra money, and so therefore they are able to support alone, independently. And then there's also this person who there's you who now is carrying all that burden, or this person who's carrying that whole burden, who has enabled this behavior. And you have enabled this behavior because, one, you have a savior mentality. You have this mentality that you have this mentality that I have to save everyone. I have to take up every burden. And just like I've been saying in this video, most of us don't earn enough money to save 15 to 20 people or the whole village. And so make peace with the fact that you cannot be a savior, and lessen the burden from yourself by collaborating with family members. So for example, you can come together with family members, and instead of being the only person who independently pays medical bills for elderly people in your family, you can collaborate with family members, where you come up with a common bank account, with a joint bank account, and you contribute money towards health insurance for this elderly person. Because if one person is contributing $50 and another person is contributing $100, another person is contributing even $7 to their capacity, one thing I noticed by collaborating is that people feel like they're part of a larger good. People actually feel proud at the end of the day. Sometimes we think that, that person is not contributing, that person only lives their life and is not contributing, and so we resent them. But as a family, you've never had that conversation and tried to ask the person, can you actually genuinely afford to contribute, even if it's $7 or $10 a month? And so what happens is that, people will feel proud because they are doing something. For example, they are saving for their grandmother's emergency fund, and then you, who was taking this savior mentality, will feel less burdened and will therefore have even more money to put towards your investments, and therefore you will have even better mental health, because most of the time we feel burdened and we even like the resentment is mutual. You who is trying to play savior, and these are people who are not contributing anything, and then there is no communication between. Please collaborate to the best of your ability, even if it means just collaborating with those ones who are willing to collaborate, and leave the others until they come to the realization that yes, I'm supposed to be part of this family project, because at the end of the day you can't force people. And then have clear financial goals. So I always say that don't let other people's lack of planning disrupt yours, because what happens is that some people are very good at timing when you receive your paycheck, and so they will always call at the end of the month and tell you how many problems they have, how many problems they have. I can't afford this, my children were chased out from school, it's end month, can you afford to give me X amount of money? And so at the end of the day, it is their responsibility, and yes, we agreed that we also have a responsibility to support, but some people are in the financial situation they are in because they don't do financial planning or because they don't budget. And so don't let other people's lack of planning disrupt yours. And so therefore you should have very clear financial goals. What do you want to achieve in the short term? What do you want to achieve in the next 5-10 years? What do you want to achieve in 20 years? How do you want to retire, for example? And so have clear financial goals, have them written down, and at the same time keep them close. I always check my financial goals are at the beginning of the month, because it's important to have them at the fingertips, so that when somebody randomly calls you with a black tax request, then you can determine that, oops, this is how far I have come towards my financial goals, and therefore I can only afford to save X amount of money. And if you're struggling to set clear financial goals, I will link an article in the description box. And then when you loan people money, family members money, ask for a payment plan in writing. Ask for a payment plan in writing. Let them not play around with your hard-earned money. And I know a lot of personal finance teachers usually say that if you loan money to your family and friends, then you should forget that money and consider it a gift. I know where that argument comes from, because most of us, who hasn't been in a situation where you loaned somebody money and then it became a tug of war when it came to a time when they were supposed to pay back, and then that tug of war became resentment and hatred. Now you don't even see each other eye to eye, you don't even attend family functions where they're there. We most of us have been there, done that, got the t-shirt, mopped the floor with it. And so ask for a payment plan and in writing. So for me, my argument is always adulthood is equals to responsibility. So we should be able to be adults who are responsible enough to pay back money when we ask for money from our family members. We should be able to create a conducive environment within our friendships, even within our family members, in a way that if somebody is struggling, they can borrow X amount of money, and then this person who is borrowing should be responsible enough, because again, adulthood equals responsibility, should be responsible enough to pay this money without that tug of war. So that's what I think about. So, but to protect yourself, who is loaning the money, because at the end of the day, it's a risk you're taking. It's an unsecured debt at the end of the day. To protect yourself, always ask for a payment plan and in writing, and hold that person accountable. Always hold people accountable. And then another point is, don't reveal your financial information. For example, don't tell people. Remember, it depends. Different families have different cultures, people are in different situations, but I've come across situations where people's moms call them at the end of the month, like clockwork, at the end of the month, because it's your paycheck, because you told them you get paid on the 28th. That 28th in the morning or 27th in the evening, they will call you to remind you that tomorrow you're getting paid, please send me X amount of money that rightfully belongs to me. And so to avoid such headaches, don't reveal such personal information. Don't tell people how much money you make. Don't tell people when you're paid, because in that way, at least you're able to set boundaries and you're able to play around with how much money you can give towards black tax. Now, despite all these points, there are some of us who, for example, you're in uni and you genuinely cannot, you're in uni and you're depending on a stipend given to you by a scholarship, for example, or given to you by a relative, and you cannot genuinely afford to pay towards black tax or give any money towards black tax. And so therefore, despite you being asked, you're always feeling guilty about how else can I afford, or how else can I contribute towards my family. There are other ways you can help your family. One, if you're good at reviewing CVs, you can help people in your family review their CVs so they can secure a job. If you're good at interview prep, you can help people prepare for an interview so that they can, nail that job interview. You can help people budget. Some of us are very good at budgeting, and for me, in my family, I tell people, I'm good at investments. I'm good at personal financial planning. So if you're struggling, ask me. If I am not able to give you money at the moment, at the very least, I can give you a free service, which I often charge. I can give you a free service of teaching you how to budget, of teaching you how to financial plan, of teaching you how to come up with a retirement plan. And you can also teach, exactly, if you know how to invest, you can teach people how to invest. You can open up these conversations. And I always say that people should be able to accept this form of help, because this is a gift of time, and your time is also valuable. It's as valuable as the money that you should have given them. But to conclude this conversation about how to deal with black tax, sometimes events beyond our control usually happen, like diseases, people pass on, disasters, such as hurricanes and floods happen. And so at the end of the day, these situations put some of us, or some people, some family members, in situations where for sure they cannot get themselves out of that situation, and therefore we have to help. Such situations happen. So in that case, what I always insist, like I said from the very beginning, in that a black tax profession should have empathy. There should be empathy and mutual respect between the giver and the receiver, because that is the only way we can make the whole concept sustainable. Now, if you loved this video and you'd like to get yourself out of the black tax situation, or to lessen or to be able to handle your black tax situation in a better way, please watch this video on how to build an emergency fund, the tips and tricks you can use to build an emergency fund fast.